Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you as I see so many people coming from different parts of the world. Welcome to this ILA CEEMAN webinar on the future of leadership. It is an honor for me to moderate this webinar today. Let me start with the introduction. My name is Aigirim Kaumianova. I come from Kazakhstan, but I'm based now in Slovenia as I serve as the director of CEEMAN, the International Network for Management Development in Dynamic Societies. It is my pleasure to host you today, and I thank you for being so active and already responding in the chat, presenting yourself and telling where you're from. I would like to acknowledge the joint effort of both ILA and CEEMAN for partnering and to advance this great idea of bringing the forces together, bringing our communities together, and also to advance leadership and management education with a shared commitment to excellence, to innovation, and to the positive impact on the society. I believe that those two networks bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise from the network of leaders, educators, and many institutions that are focused on effective leadership, on sustainable development. And with this joint initiative, I'm sure this is just the big beginning of a great, great journey for both of us. Without further ado, I would like to present our two great speakers. I have Professor David Day, an internationally recognized scholar and leadership educator, recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from ILA, and the featured speaker of the upcoming ILA Global Conference in Prague this year. And also, I'm happy to present Professor Danica Purg, the founder and the dean of the IEDC-Bled School of Management and the founding president of CEEMAN Network and a pioneer in management education in Central and Eastern Europe and an expert in integrating arts and leadership. Both of them are not just thought leaders, but also the great connectors of communities. So I would like to give the floor to both of the speakers to share a few words about themselves and also to share a few words about their organizations. Please.
Thank you. So as a woman, I have once the advantage, and I thank you very much for that, David, also to you. My name is, as you heard, Danica, and 33 years ago, when I was already for 7 years the dean of and the president of IEDC-Bled School of Management in Slovenia, I saw that we are not connected enough in this part of the world, that we are only learning from developed world, but taking the things that they were not exactly what we needed. I decided to make initiative among the schools in Eastern Central Europe and to connect us better and to start to do the things that are relevant for our societies at that time. In the meantime, we had already, every year an annual conference in a different country. This year we have it in Albania. I just came from there, a wonderful country, very quickly developed. And we have in September 24th to 26th the conference. I was also recently in Prague because this year I shall chair this great event. I have to say that I was very honored to accept and to get this, invitation. And Prague is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and I'm looking forward so much to seeing you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Danica. Hi, everyone. David Day here. Thanks for taking the time out to attend the webinar. I hope you find some points of value for your own scholarship or practice or just general interest around leadership. I'm an academic based in Southern California. I'm at Claremont McKenna College, professor of psychology and leadership, and also the academic director of the Travis Leadership Institute. One of the areas that I'm most interested in is not just the future of leadership, but the future of leadership development as well, and what that means going forward to developing the next generation of leaders for their times. I'm also representing the International Leadership Association, although I have no formal role in that organization. And if you don't know ILA, it is a global community of leaders and leadership scholars, educators, students, coaches, and development professionals who share a vision of leadership for the collective good of people and planet. So today, ILA is the largest worldwide community committed to connecting people globally to advance the practice and study of leadership for a just and thriving future. ILA members enjoy exclusive benefits such as conference registration discounts, free live on-demand webinars just like this one, access to more than 10 member community discussion groups, and much more. If you want to learn more about ILA, just type in International Leadership Association into your favorite search engine, or go to ilaglobalnetwork.org. And as Danica mentioned, the 2025 Global Conference will be in Prague the end of October. So I'm hoping to catch up with many of you there that can make it. So back to Adrian.
Thank you so much. I would like to make a little comment. I kindly ask our audience to pop in the questions in the Q&A section. And if you have any comments, you can also use the chat section there. Our colleague Deborah is also monitoring it, and she's also posting some links that we speak about. So please do watch those very closely. So I'll be also watching the chat and Q&A section, and at some point I'll be using your questions to ask our esteemed speakers. So I would like to move forward and actually start the conversation, to open the conversation. And I would like to ask David first. David, from your perspective, in the ILA community, what shifts in leadership are most significant as we look forward to the next decade? That's a big question.
Well, it is a big question, and you know, given the title of the panel around the future of leadership, trying to predict the future is always a risky business. I'm fond of quoting Peter Drucker, who in the later parts of his career was a professor at Claremont Graduate University, which is one of the colleges part of the Claremont Consortium here. And Drucker was fond of saying, the only thing we know about the future is that it's going to be different. And I think that's certainly the case in these days. And how different it will be, who knows? Who can predict with any real certainty? But I think that's part of the message as well. Things are changing, and changing perhaps more rapidly than ever before in the history of mankind. And in the implications for leadership and developing leaders in leadership is that you have to develop and have leaders who are very adaptive, who can deal with things that they've never experienced before, be able to learn their way out of these kinds of situations where there is no previous model to follow. And it's also the case where the limits of training and leadership training are felt, and the need for more leadership development is apparent. Because to me, leadership training is about providing proven solutions to known problems, whereas the leadership development is around developing a capacity for people to learn their way out of situations, out of experiences that they've never had before. And if you can, you know, you look around, it's obviously we could point to a lot of these things like pandemics, climate disasters, other kinds of global challenges that there is no model to follow. So when we talk about, you know, what is the future, I think the future is we all have to be very adaptive, very adaptable, and be able to be very keen learners and learning our way out of things we've never experienced before.
If I may add something to that, you say adaptive, David, but I think that you certainly have in mind the word creative, because I see it as a chaos, you know. I see it as a very complicated stuff, what you said, of very complicated tasks. And that's why we believe, I'm also a big believer in leadership development, And in our school, we really do a lot of creative leadership development, especially through art, to develop human senses, to develop creativity, and how to develop creativity, how to think differently, etc. So that is certainly, I mean, I know you are a great and well-known professor of leadership, and I hope that one day I invite you also to come to us and to see what we are doing in this field, because it's very unique. Like I brought people immediately to Sarajevo some days after the war, and to bring people in a difficult situation to start to see from close what happened there, etc. So the American embassy was even afraid, because I had a group of international but primarily American managers. They were suggesting not to go there. So, but we went. So they are the things, unusual things in front of us, like you said, and we shall have to make people very inventive, very sensitive on different things, better listener, better observer, and all that. A lot of that you can get through art. Music is helping us to hear better, visual arts to see better, etc. And by the way, I was in Clermont, when I read the book of Peter Drucker. We celebrated 10th anniversary in our school, and I said I would like to have him to be a speaker there. But I didn't have his address, because in that time, this was not developed on online writing. We were corresponding with fax with Peter. And so I said, but if he is such a famous guy, they will know him in Clermont. So I saw in his book was written like 1st of January, that and that year, Clermont, California. I wrote Peter Drucker, Clermont, California. And he replied in 10 days. I received his fax and I went to visit him, and he was really speaker. So I shall come once to visit you to Clermont.
Consider it an open invitation.
Thank you. Great place, I have to say.
Indeed. So let me quote one other organizational scholar to kind of put a fine point on what we've been talking about here in terms of trying to envision the future of leadership and preparing people for the future. And that comes from Carl Weick. And Carl Weick, famous organizational scholar, who had talked about, the way people view the world and the future. It's really, they believe it's a matter of deja vu. It's been here before. I know what to do, and I've got the tools in order to adapt appropriately. I just have to have those tools. But he said it's the world is changing. It's no longer a deja vu world. It's a vu-jade world. I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea who to turn to. I have no idea what will happen next. And that is really the issue around developing people to be able to learn their way out of these kinds of very challenging, wicked kinds of problems, as other people have called them.
Yes, I agree with you.
Thank you so much. And I would pop in another question, but now mostly for Danica, to ask you about CEEMAN, of course. In your work with leaders and educators across the CEEMAN network, what were the most urgent leadership capabilities that you think that we need to cultivate tomorrow?
Yeah,
apart from the creativity that you mentioned.
Yeah, thank you. You know what it is? People in the world, around the world, who don't come from East and Central Europe, they think that this is just one piece of the of the story and of the land, and there we are all thinking the same, etc. And it's far away from that. This is, this is like 500 million people, and each country has different challenges, different situations. Some are more in sustainability, the other ones are more, like Poland, for instance. They are very, very much suffering, being on the border with Ukraine and having so many refugees there, etc. Then, some others are again having, fighting, like Southeast Europe, fighting to get and to enter European Union, because they think that would even resolve the conflicts between them, because they would kind of be under one umbrella. So issues are very different, but of course, as David said already, we need all to be capable not only to use our brains, although it's good if we use more brains than we usually do, but besides this, we need to use both sides of the brain, left and right. And we need to, besides the knowledge and this, what we call tools, we are needing more sensitivity, more visions, more authenticity, and bigger efforts to understand each other, not just to accuse each other immediately, but to understand each other, that we are living in different circumstances and that we need different things in leadership development. But of course, some things are very similar, how to, especially from the human side, I would say, that from emotional side. And from that, it's, you can't imagine the leaders like we sometimes see them on TV, especially, the business people just counting the money. We need other type of leaders who will have a large vision and a great, meaning, feeling for meaning of what they are doing and for what they are fighting, working. No, I don't like the word fighting, but working for. What do you think, David? Am I right?
Of course, you're right. We need leaders who go beyond just counting the money, as you say. That's for sure. We have too many of those already. But it's also the case that we need leaders who are willing to work with other people to create leadership. The complexity of the world is advancing at such a rate that the mental complexity of any individual leader is not able to keep up with that. The only way that we will be able to figure out the challenges, the leadership challenges going forward in such a complex world, is to work with others to create solutions, create a capacity for leadership that goes beyond what any single individual leader can bring to a particular situation. So one of the competencies that we talk about in the Leadership Institute here at Claremont McKenna is this notion of collaboration. How can people collaborate to create a capacity for leadership that goes beyond what any single individual leader can bring to a situation? But it's a difficult thing oftentimes for leaders to do that, because there is this whole romanticized, heroic notion of what is leadership. And there are plenty of people who don't see that as something that has a collaborative foundation to it. It's really more of a sole Lone Ranger kind of view of the world, that there is a leader who will solve all our problems for us. And I think holding on to that notion, whether you're a leader or not, is something that will not advance us as a humankind going forward.
You use the word collaboration. That people say that this was the most used word in the time of COVID, but this is really a noble word, collaboration. We are badly needing that all over the world, in politics, in business, everywhere.
Yeah, the theme for the ILA Global Conference is leading together. And I think that's just another way of talking about collaboration. And the collaboration is one where you create a capacity for leadership that's resident not in any individual, but is actually in the relationships and the connections among people who are engaged in some shared work or addressing an adaptive challenge together.
Well, thank you both for the great insights and comments. And I see that the webinar chat, if you could also open it on your desktops, you would read a lot of nice comments that tune in with your conversation. And I also get to see some of the questions already popping in. So some of them really are the same with what I'm planning to ask next. Some of them are very interesting to ask. So how do you want to do it? Can I ask the questions now? And then we move forward. And then we'll see how this goes. So one of the questions that really tunes in with what I want to ask next is, can you identify the most important leadership competences in economy 5.0? Yeah, so that would be it
Oh,
for now.
okay. I will give you one perspective, and it's the perspective of this college and this leadership institute. And I talked about collaboration. We actually have 3 competencies that we work with our undergraduate students to develop during their time here at the institute and at the college. That we don't think it captures everything that you need to do to be an effective leader in economy 5.0 or whatever it is. And it's not the only competency model out there, because students will graduate and go into organizations. They may have their own leadership competencies, but our approach is to really set a foundation around 3 competencies to propel them forward as leaders of their times. We talked about collaboration, but there's also courage and creativity. Danica had talked about before. So these 3 of leading courageously, leading creatively, leading collaboratively, if you can move the dial on with emerging leaders on those 3 things, it sets them up on their developmental journey to be more effective than if they don't start thinking about what it means to be an effective leader in today's society until much later, in their 30s perhaps, or even in their 40s. Having been in business schools as a professor before, you get MBA students, executive MBA students, who suddenly realize that this leadership thing is pretty important because they've been put into a leadership role, and they don't really have the mindsets or the tools or the skills or the competencies to lead effectively. Unfortunately, they've developed a lot of bad habits that affect their leadership. So a lot of what you end up doing with people who are older, who come into a leadership development space, is helping them to unlearn all their bad habits before you can intervene on making them more effective as leaders. So our theory here, our philosophy here, is really to try to intervene earlier in these emerging leaders who are just, it's a very pivotal point in their lives, going from adolescence, late adolescence, to young adulthood. And a lot of, disruptions in their lives, a lot of developmental changes. It's a perfect time to help them to start thinking about, what does it mean to be a leader, and how to start preparing themselves on this leadership journey, which could last a lifetime.
Very good. I saw that, Oriane, a very good, I really like what you said now. And also I like the title that we gave together to this year ILA conference, who were leading together. I saw on the screen Oriane, the daughter of Manfred Ketz de Vries, and he will also have a speech there. He is also like you, David. He received the Life Achievement Award, but they succeeded, and we succeeded to convince him to come again. So we are very much looking forward to talk about leadership also at the conference with Manfred. And so welcome, Oriane. You will be also there, I understood.
Yeah, I think, Professor de Vries, Manfred Ketz de Vries, he has a really interesting perspective on, some of these things that develop in leaders that keep them from being perspective. His approach is much more rooted in psychodynamic theory, but it's also, this notion of, why do we have toxic leadership? Why do we have abusive leadership? What are some of the kinds of challenges, interdynamic, interpersonal challenges that people face that prevent them from being the most effective leader that they can be. And how do you change that? And it goes back to my previous point, is that some of these things are so well entrenched that it almost takes, decades of psychotherapy in order to undo them before people can right the ship and move along in an effective and functional direction. So I'm looking forward to hearing Professor Katz de Vries speak at ILA in Prague.
So now that we kind of turned towards the future of leadership, there were two questions about the role of AI in the leadership development, and what's the effect of AI at the moment that you see on the leadership development?
Well, I think one of the things that's going to change is that in the future, we may be talking about human leadership versus artificial leadership. What that will look like, again, hard to predict, but I do think one of the things that's coming, and it's coming very quickly, is an artificially intelligent approach to development of leaders and leadership that puts a lot more tools in the hands of developing leaders. As of now, a lot of that ownership for leadership development is owned by HR functions in organizations, talent management functions in organizations. Other people are responsible for the design and delivery of leadership development interventions in formal organizations. The future may be one where every individual is their own design architect of their bespoke development. The tools will be there, helping people to discern the good tools, the effective tools, the evidence-based tools from the non-evidence-based tools. May be a shift in responsibility rather than actually doing the design yourself, is helping people design their own bespoke leadership development approaches. One of the things that we know about development is that people start at different places and change in different ways. What is good for one person is not helpful for another person. So this whole individualization piece has been something that has bedeviled the leadership development field for decades, because it's hard to scale something that is so completely individualized. But with artificial intelligence, it may allow us to address both of those particular challenges, individualization and scaling. But it's going to take a very different perspective on what development means. And there are people who have been the historical owners of these processes and practices to shift, to let go, and help people own their own development going forward. And I know that there are some people in HR who, that's a very scary proposition. What do you mean letting people own their development? We own their development. And I think that's not going to be the case going forward.
Very well explained. Very well. I see artificial intelligence, like you said, and especially as a tool to help to be more effective, quicker, etc. But not that now somebody is deciding instead of me, but helping me to decide on some how shall I say, on some data, which I don't have or wouldn't have.
Yeah, well, I think the whole field of leadership development will be disruptive massively with artificial intelligence, and it's going to be coming down the pike pretty soon. So if you are in that field, whether you're an internal consultant, an external consultant, and you try to hold on to the traditional ways of doing leadership development, I think you're going to be left in the dust. I think you need to rethink your role in helping people to develop in real time in their own ways. And, one example that we're already starting to see is the whole coaching field and the role of, chatbots and large language models in coaching through artificial intelligence. And I know that there was a lot of pushback in early days saying, well, people won't buy into a non-human coach. And I think we have evidence now, maybe it's mostly anecdotal evidence, but there's plenty of it out there, that people, at least some people, can really become attached to their chatbot, to trust this artificially intelligent coach that they interact with on a regular basis whenever they want to. No need to schedule an appointment. So those things are going to massively disrupt the leadership development industry. And I'm just not sure whether most people see that coming.
And what do you think about coaching yourself in this respect?
What do I think about coaching as an industry,
Yeah,
or
you
coaching?
have this Jonathan Gosling and a group of people who are, predicting this and talking about that, like coaching yourself.
So it's a tool. It's a tool that can be used and it can be misused. I mean, the thing that's scary about that is reading about some of the stories about, these large language models, these chat bots who hallucinate, who make stuff up, or may echo certain kinds of dysfunctional things that a human says to it. And that's part of the whole ethics of AI. That's another burgeoning field that we have to pay very close attention to. So the risk is not every chat bot is going to necessarily be as empathetic or as insightful as a fellow human would be, because a chatbot can't know how you feel because they don't feel unless you tell them how you feel. And that might fuel a kind of spiral that can lead to some kinds of dysfunctional behaviors on the part of someone being coached by an artificially intelligent coach. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but there's certain case studies out there of people who have done self-harm, other dysfunctional kinds of things, because they bought in too much to what a chatbot was telling them, as the unvarnished truth, which is not something that a chatbot can really know what the unvarnished truth is. What it can do is relay back to you what you are telling it with its access to, voluminous literature that's available on the World Wide Web. So I guess is my long-winded way of saying is that, yeah, the industry is going to be disrupted. Coaching is going to change massively. It's going to make it a lot more affordable than it ever was before, but there's still some risks involved in turning over your future to something that is not real, but can sometimes feel very real.
True.
Well, I saw one.
Indeed. Woof, woof. I agree. Woof. What a world. What a world.
What a world we live in. Yeah. Nevertheless, it's exciting. There was another question about whether leadership is a personal characteristic or is it a situational thing. And there was a discussion already in the chat, and people were saying there are different sides to that. And we would love to hear your quick answers about that.
Sure. What I'll refer to is something that was published in the literature decades ago, and it was around substitutes for leadership. Karen Jamer's very influential article around what are kinds of things in the environment that might substitute for leadership. So this could be just the structure of the task itself. could be something that substitutes for leadership. You don't need leadership if the task is well structured, because the leadership is embedded in what the task is doing. So leadership can come from something that's imposed on a situation, or it can emerge from the situation itself. So when we talk about human leadership going forward, it's something that a person would bring to some interpersonal context or interpersonal situation. But we might also talk about AI leadership as a type of substitute for human leadership that can provide the same kinds of advantages that leadership does, but it's not necessarily coming from a human-centered agent.
So you would say, in fact, it's both. It's
Well, yeah, I think
situational.
historically, yeah. Thank you for that question. I think historically, leadership has been both. It's been something that has come from a person, and that's how we typically think about it. But leadership can also be embedded in the situation. That is, there could be a substitute for a human leader based on like I said, the task structure. It could be the relationships among people in a particular context. It could be a number of things situationally that replace the need for traditional leadership.
Shall we move on? And there are so many questions. I want to voice as many as I can. So maybe Danica, you could take the next one. What role the values play in the future leadership when it comes to the personal or corporate roles?
Yeah, again, I think that this, you would say it depends, but values are getting more and more important in leadership. And in general, in life, we may not forget what are the real values, and how the leader could bring more people around these values and do the things. If you are on like in the marriage, if you are living with the same values in the, a couple is living, it is just the same as in a company or wherever. You are sticking together, you fight for this, you work for these values, etc. So I think that again we come back to humanity. And today, in this terrible world of wars, etc., I really ask myself, where are the human values? So I think that management schools should do much more concerning the meaning, the values, the real meaning of life, the real meaning of leadership, the real, we should come back to the real, and whether it's a question back, I don't know, but to this, I'm sure that you have more scientific answer on that. But we are very much talking also in our school about identity of the leaders, and we have an artist who comes and it's working with students for a day on identity, how to discover your identity, how to build up your identity, how to, have an identity, and how to, to live through the life with this identity, etc. So they are, and then, and after you have this, you can make also leadership development different, because it goes on identity of different people, and so these are very interesting things and big tasks for the educators to work on. But as I said, I'm very interested in what David has to say about that.
Yeah, so in some of my writing with in my book and with other authors, we talk about proximal indicators of leader development, and oftentimes what we look at in terms of outcomes of leader development are around things of like skills and competencies and things that you learn to do, but self views are also really important. And a leader identity is one of these self views. Do you consider yourself a leader? And that's a really important component, because it can motivate practice and development over the long term. So when we talk about identity, what becomes core to our identity are things that really matter to us, things that we really value. Back to your point about values, things that we value become integral to our identity, and becoming a leader involves adopting to some extent that notion of a leader identity, not to the exclusion of any other identity component, because we have multifaceted identities, but it should be some component of the self in order to motivate this learning and development, this practice over the long term. Other self-views include leader self-awareness and leader self-efficacy as well, the confidence to step forward as a leader. But back to this notion of value, one of the books that I use in my leader development seminar with undergraduates here is Adam Grant's book about hidden potential. And in that book, even though it's not about leadership, it's not about leader development, he talks about character. And character to him is the learned capacity to live by your principles. So what are your principles? Your principles are simply a reflection of your core values. And I think this is what differentiates or will differentiate human leaders and human leadership from artificial leaders and leadership. I mean, a chatbot doesn't have values. So that's a very interesting ethical question if you're dealing with a leader with no values, as opposed to a human leader who has values and explicit principles by which they live and act by. And there's some really profound ethical issues associated with following leaders with no values. And I think AI bots have no values.
Yeah. Very good. And we have, excuse me, Aigerim, we have a relatively new subject now in our MBA, just what you were telling about character of the leaders, etc. So I was in the beginning surprised, not so pleasantly surprised, that this is also a part of the curriculum. But students are very happy with that subject.
Yeah, I think, that's why I like Grant's definition of values, of character, because we tend to think of character as something that is dispositional, that doesn't change. It's almost genetic. Your character is something that is forged very early on in your life and is stable across the lifespan. But this notion of a learned capacity to live by your principles is something that I think is at the core of developing ethical and effective leaders and leadership. So it's a learned capacity. But if you don't know what your principles are, how can you have that capacity to live by them? And that's part of the developmental journey, helping people to surface what their values are, what's important to them, and how these values translate into principles that guide their behavior.
You mentioned ethics for the first time, but we are in fact talking all the time about it.
Sure. I mean, it's one of those topics that is pervasive in everything. I mean, as we know, it's a branch of philosophy that is still viable today around what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong. So ethics should definitely be part of any leader development curriculum for sure.
Yes.
That brings me to the next question. Actually, that's just very central to what you're talking about. What are the changes that you see in the formats and delivery methods when it comes to educating leaders? I mean,
can you say that? Can you say that again? I don't think I caught the beginning of that, Adrian.
So what changes you see in the formats and delivery methods when it comes to educating leaders? And I'm sorry I stopped that. I think you started already talking about the curriculum developments for these.
No, I just wanted to say for fun, not to make it too serious, I just wanted to tell you that we started with our school 39 years ago. And 39 years ago, I was already introducing ethics as a required subject in the MBA. And you know what? And I didn't have a professor. So I invited the bishop to come to lecture on ethics, a bishop who was very big writer about ethical issues and real intellectual, you know. And then, you know, he was talking about ethics. Everybody was listening. Students were very happy. But then somebody asked him, what is more ethical for you, to dismiss people or to lie to the government and this and that? And then he said, I'm sorry about these questions. I was never thinking, you know, it was very special. I shall never forget this moment in my life, how I was introducing ethics for the first time, you know. Today is, of course, different way. We are teaching ethics and putting it through dilemmas, letting people think, reflect. You know, reflection is one of the very important things that we like to teach the managers, because they are running through the life and they don't have time for reflection and then don't make it, etc. I'm sure you have the same experience with that, David.
Sure. One of the things, going back to this notion of the curriculum for leader development and how it's changing over time, and apologies to those of you out in the audience who've heard me go on this spiel before, but I think most people think about leader development as almost a ticket to an amusement park. They get to go to some special place, go on some really cool rides, have a great experience, and then after a few hours or maybe a day or two, it's over, they leave, and they're like, wow, that's fantastic. Now my development is done for the year. And it's no wonder it doesn't really change much of anything in terms of either leadership or the capacity to lead more effectively. What the appropriate metaphor is not an amusement park, but it's a gym membership. You know, people who embrace this notion of developing as a leader need to think about it as going to the gym. And I mean, what do we know about gym memberships? A lot of people buy them, don't use them. People who do use them may not use them appropriately. They go there to socialize as opposed to really work out. What we need are people to use the so-called gym of life, that is their ongoing daily experiences, to continue to develop them. Leader development is not something that can happen just in the head. It just can't happen only in the classroom. It has to be out there in the world. So, you know, there's a social psychology maxim that thinking is for doing, but it's also the case that doing causes thinking. So this is, you know, Herminia Ibarra talked about what people need to do, first of all, in their developmental journeys, is act like a leader. So if you act like a leader, it's going to change how you think, but it's also this notion that you have to put it into action if it's going to work. And it's not going to some special place, the amusement park, in order to put that into action. It's in your everyday life. And one of the things that I think is surprising to students is, you know, small things can add up to big changes over time. And that's essentially the recipe for James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. You know, very small things that you can do, but you do them regularly in the gym of life, can have big consequences over time. Yet I think people believe implicitly that if they're going to develop as a leader, they have to put themselves into some huge major challenge that risks putting them in over their heads. And, you know, there are people who talked about this. Warren Bennis talked about crucibles of leadership, you know, which are these experiences that really do challenge you and perhaps forge your leadership over time. But I think if people want to own their development, think more about atomic habits and small things that can do on a regular basis in the gym of life that add up to big changes. May not have addressed your ethical issue, but I think, you know, acting like a leader means acting with integrity, right? So what does it mean for you to be a principle-based leader? What's it mean to be a values-based leader? It means you're acting according to your values, all the time, not some of the time, all of the time. And where does that happen? It doesn't happen in the classroom. It happens in the so-called gym of life.
Thank you so much. I see a lot of exciting questions, and I'm really sad that we have just an hour, and I think we need to come back again and gather again to continue this conversation. And I'm sure our speakers would be happy to take some questions by email, or you can always reach out to ILA and CEEMAN Secretariat offices to send over those and pass on the information and the requests and the comments. And I see the exciting conversation we have in the webinar. So thank you so much, dear audience, for that. But I would like to stop for a second here and just to remind again that both ILA and CEEMAN are having two big events that are happening this fall. And I think it's the power of gatherings and the power of connecting and leading together and joining our heads to find great solutions for the future is exactly what we need to be doing. So these two conferences are coming up. So the first one coming up is the CEEMAN Annual Conference. We will take it in Albania in late September 24-26. And the topic is the role of business schools in the new world order. So we will have exciting panel sessions, company visits to the local enterprises in Albania. We also have our poster session for the researchers, and of course, as a accreditation agency, we have to have our own accreditation workshop. And on top of that, a lot of panel sessions with exciting speakers that come from management education field. And the next event is the International Leadership Association Global Conference that will be held in Prague in mid-October 15 to 18 with a topic, as was already mentioned, leading together. That would be a very big event. And it's very exciting for me to announce that we'll have 17 thematic streams. It's over 100 sessions, and David and Danica will be there. So I think this is a unique opportunity for you to meet them in person and to ask more questions and engage in conversations. So before we wrap up, I would like to ask both of the speakers to give me something that they want to share about the upcoming events. And maybe you could recommend a session or a speaker, or you want just to say something about this upcoming conference topic, please do so.
Okay, shall I start? I think that I recommend you to come to ILA to listen to David. That will be certainly very good and very interesting. But of course, since I'm a CEEMAN president, I also have to say, and this conference is now in September, I would like to say that there is still summer in Albania in that time, that we have it on the beach side. So I was these days really enjoying, not swimming because I didn't have time for that, but you know, we have also this in the program before in the morning, you know, in the gym, you know, like a gym on the seaside. So it will be very interesting. But now, seriously talking, I would like to say that we have a very special session there called Business School in the New World Order, a facilitator or a toy. Because we invited also former president of Slovenia, who was even, you know, when Kofi Annan was the Secretary General of United Nations, he was his assistant there, and then or vice person there. Then, you know, we also invited Prime Minister of Albania, who was in '94 the mayor of in the whole world. You know, how to say, appointed in New York for the mayor of the world, etc. So we have some extraordinary politicians or former politicians who will give us their view on the situation in the world. And we also want that management educators are talking about this, what I said, this topic. What is the role of the business school or management school today? Is it facilitator, or it is just the toy in the hands of politicians and some influential businessmen? So this, and then the other thing I think it will be very interesting, it's also how can CEEMAN be a platform for global collaboration in management education. And there we have you know, people from all over the world, also president of the International Academy of Management, talking about this, the issues of the collaboration, how we should collaborate more in the future, the business schools, on different topics, not just that we go to see each other, but that we are developing programs for leadership development together, that we are doing some things, that we are killing the prejudices people have, you know, about each other and so on. So this it's like management education in the new order, in the new political and of course economic order, to new world order. So it will be quite an engaged meeting of 2 days, but then all other things that Igor mentioned. So altogether will be 4 days, and of course you can stay there a little bit longer if you want to have some vacations or some going to see some historical monuments, because Albania is like Greece, you know, very similar to Greece, having a lot of monuments from Greek times, etc. So I hope to meet you there. And of course, I hope to meet you in Prague. Also, can you imagine 1,200 people coming together, having 100 big, how do you say, not lessons, but 100 big events and so on and so on, and all focused on leadership. Isn't that so?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's something that has always attracted me to ILA. It is the only professional association that I know of that's really about leadership globally, and everyone who attends the session, everyone who's a member of ILA, has that common interest around advancing leadership for public purpose, public good. The full program for the ILA is not yet available online, but some things did catch my attention. There are some sessions featuring the history and culture of Prague, and I think those are things that those of us who are unfamiliar with Prague and Prague's history, like myself, should avail themselves of. And there's one in particular that really caught my eye, and it's called Leading Without Hope. Václav Havel's absurd theater and its lesson for a post-truth era. And apologies for the editorializing here a bit, but you know, as an American living in the U.S. in these times, I feel like I have a front row seat in the theater of the absurd. So learning how to lead without hope, I think, is especially appropriate in our times in this country, and I hope to see you at that session.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing great perspectives today. It was so invigorating and insightful, and I'm sure everyone loved it as well as I did. We discussed so many topics, and if we had more time, of course, we would cover the rest of those topics, and that's what those conferences are for, to continue the conversation. Let me remind our audience that we would need 1 or 2 days to make the recording available, and it will be available on the ILA and CEEMAN platforms. So please do visit our websites. Please do sign up for the newsletters for ILA and CEEMAN, because this is how you get connected with this huge community. And yeah, just thank you very much for being here today. I hope to see you very soon in Albania and in Czech Republic. Have a great day. And thank you so much, Danica. Thank you so much, David, for being with us here today.
Thank you all. Thank you all for attending. See you in Prague.
Thank you very much.